If you care about public safety, then you should demand a government that keeps you safe, not only by punishing crime, but also by preventing accidents. Because the reality is that most of the things that snatch life away early or put people in hospitals are accidents, and a lot of them are preventable if the government cares about doing that. So we know that populist conservative politicians love to talk about crime, and they love to find little tweaks they can make to the law that will let them stand in front of a podium and pose as public safety champions. Last week, for example, the Ford government tweaked the Highway Traffic Act so that people who are suspected of the crime of dangerous driving causing death can have their licenses and their cars taken away from them roadside. And that's fine, even though the Highway Traffic Act already lets police officers do that by charging people with a very similar crime. And even though there's no stats or particular reason to believe that anyone's going to be losing their license or their car early who would not have had that happen to them under the old law. It's 100% true that policing and prosecuting and punishing criminals is something the government's got to do. But accidents kill and injure more people every year than crime does. And if your government doesn't seem to care about that, or if they're making it worse, then you got to demand a better government. So here in Etobicoke Centre, I checked the stats, and of all the people who were killed in traffic fatalities over the past 5 years, 70% of those incidents had no mention of the police searching for a suspect or laying a charge. And that means that they were accidents. Not even accidents arising to the level of criminal negligence or anything else that could lead to charges. Because dying or being injured in an accident is just as bad as dying or being injured at the hands of a criminal. And at all those early funerals, the bereaved family members and friends are just as devastated when it was the result of an accident as they are when it was a crime. So at Queen's Park this week, responding to the new legislation, Ontario Liberal Party leader John Fraser made a great point. He said the bottom line is public safety. And this same government is making that worse by ripping out all of the speed enforcement cameras across the province. They're also raising the speed limits on the 400 series highways. And they're also licensing the sale of alcohol at roadside rest stops owned by the government on provincial land. So I drive past these signs a few times a week going to Windsor and back, and I gotta say, I just don't get it. Because someone is gonna pull into one of these rest side stops when they see the sign, and they're gonna buy a 6-pack, and they're not planning on hurting anyone. They don't have any criminal intent, but the 6-pack's gonna be sitting on the passenger seat. And as they're going down the highway, they're gonna get bored, and they're just gonna open a couple of those beers. And meanwhile, they're driving at 130 kilometers per hour because the speed limit's been raised. And they've probably also heard that the government has taken out all the speed enforcement cameras, so they're not as worried as they otherwise would be about being caught. And accidents are gonna happen, and people are gonna die. And the bereaved people at those funerals should be just as mad at the government that causes the accident to happen by relaxing the laws in these ways as they would be if it were some sort of criminal intent that put them there. So it's no surprise that it's a populist government that's doing all this stuff, because populism is literally defined as the belief that the world is divided into the innocent, good people on one side and then the bad, corrupt people on the other. And those bad, corrupt people can be elites or outsiders or criminals. That's the populist mindset. And crime fits into that narrative, so they love talking about it. Accident prevention doesn't. But the reality is that each and every single one of us is capable of taking a life when we get behind the wheel. Not because we're bad people, but just because we're human. But it doesn't have to be that way. The price of preventing accidents is giving up just a little bit of freedom. Giving up the freedom to break the speed limit law and get away with it if there's no cops nearby. Giving up the freedom to buy alcohol literally at the side of Highway 401 instead of driving an extra 4 minutes to buy it at a store closer to home. And another freedom that we gave up is the freedom to drive around without wearing a seatbelt. When seatbelt laws were first introduced, making it mandatory in the 80s, there was a lot of protest. And Doug Ford would have been one of the people protesting it if he'd been in politics at the time. But seatbelt laws have saved tens of thousands of lives. And the freedom we give up is so minuscule compared to the benefits of preventing those early funerals. So if your government doesn't seem to care about preventing accidents, if they just want to talk about crime and punishment, then ask whether they really care about public safety. And if they don't, then demand a better government.